Just
Where is the value going to be created in AI?
That's a great one. So I think the at least in my current thing is there are two places where I can say with some confidence. One is the hyperscalers do well, right? Because the fundamental thing is, if you sort of go back to even how Sam and others describe it, I mean, like if, intelligence is log of compute, whoever can do lots of compute is a big winner.
Right.
And the other interesting thing is, if you look at underneath even any AI workload, like take ChatGPT, it's not like everybody's excited about what's happening on the GPU side. It's great, but it's like the ratio, in fact, I think of my fleet even as a ratio of the AI accelerator, not just for training, but we now know for test time. And as I said, test time, like here's an interesting thing. When you think of an AI agent, it turns out the AI agents is going to exponentially increase compute usage because you now are not even bound by just one human invoking a program. It's one human invoking programs that invoke lots more programs. And so that's going to create massive, massive demand and scale for compute infrastructure. And having competed against Oracle and IBM in client server, I knew that, look, the buyers will not tolerate winner take all, right? Structurally, hyperscale will never be a winner take all. Because buyers are smart. Consumer market sometimes can be winner take all, but anything there, the buyer is a corporation, an enterprise, an IT department. So that, I think, is what will happen even in the model side. So there will be open source. There will be a governor, just like on Windows. One of the big lessons learned for me was if you have a closed source operating system, there will be a complement to it, which will be open source. And so to some degree, that's a real check on what happens. And so I think in models, there is one dimension of maybe there will be a few closed source. There will definitely be an open source alternative.
Even forgetting the jargon, like if you've got AGI and it's like helping you make better AIs, right now it's synthetic data in RL, maybe in the future it's an automated AI researcher. That seems like a good way to entrench your advantage there. I'm curious what you make of that, just the idea that like interesting the advantage you as a hyperscaler would have in the sense that, especially with inference time scaling, and if that's involved in training future models, you can amortize your data centers and GPUs, not only for the training, but then use them again for inference.
Than anything else, right? So therefore, the way I think about it is, hey, distributed computing will remain distributed. So go build out your fleet such that it's ready for large training jobs. It's ready for test time compute. It's ready. In fact, if this RL thing, the thing that might happen is
revenue from AI is $13 billion. But if you look at your year-on-year growth on that, in like 4 years, it'll be 10x that. You'll have $130 billion in revenue from AI if the trend continues. If it does,
economists, at least I look at it and say, man, we have a real growth challenge.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we all have to do is and when we say, oh, this is like the industrial revolution, blah, blah, blah. Oh, let's have that industrial. Then somebody said, hey, I'm just going to take an Excel spreadsheet, put it in email, send it around. People will go edit it and I'll have a forecast. So the entire forecasting business process changed because the work artifact, and the workflow changed. That is what needs to happen with AI being introduced into knowledge work. In fact, when we think about even all these agents, the fundamental thing is there's a new work and act and then shared. So the new workflow for me is I think with AI and work with my colleagues, right? So that's a fundamental change management of everyone who's doing knowledge work suddenly figuring out improvement, which is reduce waste and increase value. That's what's going to come to knowledge. This is like lean for knowledge work in particular. And that's going to be the hard work, very email heavy. So I got in the morning and I'm like, man, like my inbox is full and I'm responding. And so I can't wait for some of these copilot agents to kind of automatically populate, to manage all the agents and their dialogue. So that's why I think of this copilot as the UI for AI is a big, big deal. And each of us is going to have it as, so basically think of it as there is knowledge work and there's a knowledge worker, right? The knowledge work may be done.
You're one of the few people in the world who can say that you have access to 200,000, you have this like swarm of intelligence around you in the form of Microsoft, the company, and all its employees. And you have to manage that, and you have to like, how to interface with that, how to.
The vision that we've always had is you need a physics breakthrough in order to build a utility scale quantum computer that works. And so we took that path, which was the path of sort of saying, look, the one way for having that less noisy effectively, right? So this is why I think we like the analogy of thinking of this as the transistor moment of quantum computing, where we effectively have a new phase, which is the topological phase, which is more reliable. So one of the things that we've started doing is really using AI as the emulation engine, but you can then train. So the way I think of it as, if you have AI plus quantum, maybe you'll use quantum to generate synthetic data that then gets used by AI to train better models. People who didn't invest. It is like you need to have a culture that knows how to take an innovation and scale it. And this is the other publication in Nature. And the cool thing is, what I'm excited about is bringing, so we're going to have a catalog of games soon that we will start sort of using these models or will that. But the fact that this data asset is going to be interesting, not just in gaming context, but it's going to be a general action model and a world model. It's fantastic. I mean, I think about gaming data as perhaps, what YouTube is perhaps to Google, game piece, the quantum we talked about, and the AI is the other one. So these are the three things that I look at and say, how do you bring these things together? Ultimately, not as tech for tech's sake, but solving some of the fundamental things that we as humans want in our life, and more we want them to. And to me, the systems breakthrough is the quantum thing.
Yeah.
Is there a business logic breakthrough? Yeah. That's kind of like AI to me, which is like, can the logic tier be fundamentally reasoned differently, and instead of imperatively right.
One might also say that we're birthing a new species, one whose intelligence may have no upper limits. Now, super early, of course, to be talking about this in 2017. We so far been talking in sort of like a granular fashion about agents and Office, Copilot, and CapEx and so forth. But you just zoom out and consider this statement you've made, and you think about like you as somebody as a hyperscaler, as the person doing research in these models as well, providing training and
trust, whether it's personal or societal level, trust that's baked in. That's the hard problem. Because I think the one biggest rate limiter to the power here will be, how does our legal, call it infrastructure, we're talking about all the compute infrastructure, how does the legal infrastructure evolve to deal with this? Like, entire world is constructed with things like humans owning property, having rights, and being liable. Like, it has consequences.
But if you have this picture where you could have 10% economic growth, it really, I think, like depends on actually getting like something like AGI working, right? Because tens of trillions of dollars of value, that sounds closer to like human wages are $60 trillion of the economy. Getting that magnitude is just like you kind of have to automate labor or supplement labor in a very significant way. If that is possible, and once you figure out the legal ramifications for it.
But you bring up another one. I mean, I know David Otter and others have talked a lot about this, which is that 60% of labor. Like, what I think the other question that needs to happen is, let's at least talk about our democratic societies. I think that in order to have a stable social structure and democracies function, you just can't have return on capital and no return on labor. Liability in all of this. So that's why I'm more interested in deploying these things in where, you can actually govern what the scope of these things is and the scale of these things is. And so you just can't unleash something out there in the world that creates harm. Can the LLM help me do my knowledge work using all of these tools or canvases more effectively? Like, one of the best demos that I've seen is a doctor getting ready for a tumor board workflow, right? So she's going in to a tumor board meeting. And so one of the first things she uses Copilot for is to create an what I'm focused on the actual case versus taking notes, because you now have this AI Copilot doing a full transcription of all of this, and just basically an intelligent, it's not just a transcript, but think of it as a database entry of what is in the meeting that is recallable for all time, right? So then she comes out of the meeting, having sort of discussed the case and not being distracted by note-taking. And she's a teaching doctor. She wants to go and prep for her class. And so she goes into Copilot and says, hey, take my tumor board. And they're all there. And so I think that's kind of what's going to happen with even agents. So there will be a UI layer. To me, Office is not just about the Office of today. It's the UI layer for knowledge work. It'll evolve as the workflows evolve. That's what we want to build. I do think the SaaS applications that exist today, right, these CRUD applications are going to fundamentally be changed, because the business logic will go more into this agentic tier. In fact, one of the other cool things today in my Copilot experience is when I say, hey, I'm getting ready for a meeting with a customer, I just go and say, give me all the notes for it that I should know. And it pulls from my CRM database. It pulls from my Microsoft Graph, creates a composite, essentially, artifact. And that means, and then it applies even logic. The fact that I can interrogate all of my SaaS applications using agents and get more utility will be the greatest explosion of apps. They'll be called agents. So that you can, for every vertical in every industry.
Questions is whether you think AGI is a thing, in the sense of like, will there be a thing which automates at least like starting with all cognitive labor, like anything that anybody can do on a computer?
See, this is where my problem with the definitions of how people talk about it is cognitive labor is not a static thing, right? Like there is cognitive labor today. If I have an inbox that is managing all my agents, is that new cognitive labor? And so that's why I think this distinction, at least in my head, I make is don't conflate knowledge worker with knowledge work. The knowledge work of today could probably be automated. Who said my life's goal is to triage my email, right? Let an AI agent triage my email. But after having triaged my email, give me a higher level cognitive labor task of a world where there are powerful cognitive machines, knowing that our cognitive agency is not being taken away.
Without embarrassment, suppose on the Microsoft board, could you ever see adding an AI to the board? Could it ever have the sort of like judgment and context and holistic understanding to be a useful advisor?
Like we added, just a quarter, and they're trying to digest what the heck is happening with a complex company like Microsoft. I think a facilitator agent that